She survived hyperspace travel, a galactic academy, and an alien starport with her sanity fully intact. What nearly broke her? A family barbecue. And by the end of this story, that same girl would be standing in a white dress, in front of everyone she loved, on a planet she wasn't born on, about to marry the human who once called her, good girl, by accident. This is the part nobody saw coming. When we last left Selene Rook, wolf-human hybrid, galaxy-crossing overachiever, troll doll confidant, and certified sneaker enthusiast, she had just stepped off a transit shuttle onto Earth and immediately sat down on wet tarmac because the smell of rain on pavement was simply too much for one wolf girl heart to handle. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of adjusting to Earth's gravity, Earth's grocery stores, and Earth's deeply confusing obsession with something called pumpkin spice, which Selene had tried once, made a face that could only be described as betrayed, and then ordered 4 more. She and Ryan had settled into a small apartment on the edge of a mid-sized American city, the kind with a decent coffee shop on every corner and a dog park that Selene visited far too often, much to the visible confusion of the actual dogs. Her tail had not stopped moving since they landed. "It's the air," she told Ryan one morning, mid-stretch, ears forward, tail doing a slow figure eight of pure contentment. "Earth air smells like 1,000 stories happening at once." "That's pollen," Ryan said. "You're allergic to pollen." "I am allergic," Selene said, "to nothing. I am simply moved." She was, in fact, extremely allergic to pollen. This would become relevant later. Keep that in your back pocket. 3 weeks into their new life on Earth, Ryan came home from running errands with a strange look on his face, the look of a man who has just remembered something important and is not sure how to bring it up. He set down the grocery bags. He looked at Selene. He opened his mouth. "Oh," he said carefully, "my best friend wants to meet you." Selene's ears went straight up. "And," Ryan continued, even more carefully, "my parents would like to have us over for dinner. This weekend. All of it. At once." Selene's tail stopped moving entirely. "Define all of it," she said slowly. Ryan winced. "Family. Friend. Backyard. Possibly a grill." Now, to understand the stakes here, you have to understand Marcus. Marcus Webb had been Ryan's best friend since they were both 8 years old, and Ryan had defended Marcus's questionable haircut against the entire 3rd grade. Marcus was loud, loyal, allergic to subtlety, and, according to Ryan, the single nosiest person to ever exist on planet Earth, and I say that with love. Marcus did not yet know that Ryan's new roommate-turned-girlfriend was, biologically speaking, part wolf. Ryan had tried to explain this over the phone 3 separate times. Each time, Marcus had responded with some version of, "Wait, like, a furry thing? Bro, is she a furry?" "No, Marcus. She's an alien. From an alien planet." "That's what I said. A furry. That is not even close to what you said." So when Marcus Webb showed up at Ryan and Selene's apartment that Friday evening, wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right," and carrying a 6-pack he absolutely should not have been allowed to buy at his age, he was, to put it generously, unprepared. The door opened. He saw the ears first. Then the tail. Then the leather collar with the small metal tag that read, "Good Girl," which, to be fair, was an extremely confusing detail to process within the first 4 seconds of meeting someone. Marcus's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "Okay," he said finally, "first of all, incredible ears. Second of all, Ryan, you didn't tell me she had a custom collar tag. What is happening? Are you too into?" Marcus. "I'm just saying, that's a whole vibe, I respect it." Selene, who had spent 15 years studying human social customs through YouTube videos, calmly extended her hand for a human-style handshake, a gesture she had practiced in the mirror approximately 40 times, and said, with perfect composure, "Hello, Marcus. I am Selene Rook, of Vargen Prime. The tag is not what you think. Also, I will be taking one of those drinks, as I have heard human social bonding rituals often involve communal beverage consumption." There was a long pause. Marcus looked at Ryan. "Dude," he said slowly, "she's better at this than you are." "I'm aware," Ryan said. And then Selene reached into the 6-pack, cracked one open with the casual confidence of someone who had practiced opening bottle caps for exactly this moment, took a long sip, made a face like she'd been personally wronged by the beverage industry, and said, "This is terrible. I love it." We are friends now. Marcus burst out laughing so hard he had to sit down on the floor. It was, by every metric, a successful first meeting. It was also, unfortunately, just the warm-up round. If meeting Marcus was the warm-up round, meeting Ryan's parents was the championship match. And championship matches, as any seasoned competitor knows, require preparation. Selene had spent the entire week preparing. She had researched. She had taken notes. She had watched no fewer than 37 YouTube videos with titles like, How to Meet Your Boyfriend's Parents Without Dying, and Mother-in-Law Survival Guide, Gone Wrong. She had practiced a firm but warm handshake. She had practiced complimenting a home's interior design without sounding insincere. She had practiced the specific tone of voice humans used when saying, "Oh, you didn't have to," about a gift, a phrase she'd identified as critically important across at least 9 different videos. What she had not practiced, what no YouTube video could have prepared her for, was Diane Collins. Diane Collins, Ryan's mother, opened the front door of the Collins family home on Saturday afternoon, looked Selene up and down for exactly 1 second, and then promptly burst into tears. Selene froze. This had not been in any of the videos. "Oh my God," Diane said, both hands pressed to her face, "You're real, he wasn't joking, you have ERS, oh my God, come here, come here." And before Selene could process what was happening, she was being pulled into a hug so enthusiastic it nearly knocked her sneakers off the porch. "Mom," Ryan said weakly from behind her, "you're scaring her." "I'm not scaring her, I'm welcoming her, this is welcoming, Robert, come look, she's wonderful." Robert Collins, Ryan's father, a man whose entire personality could be summarized as, Dad who grills, emerged from the backyard wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook, legally required disclaimer, results may vary," and stopped dead in the doorway. He looked at Selene. He looked at her ears. Her tail. The collar. A long silence stretched out across the porch. And then Robert Collins said the only thing that mattered, the only question that had clearly been on his mind since Ryan first mentioned an alien girlfriend 3 weeks prior. "Does she eat regular hamburgers, or do I need to do something special?" Selene blinked. "I eat," she said carefully, "anything that does not actively object to being eaten." Robert Collins considered this for a moment. Then he smiled the biggest smile Ryan had ever seen on his father's face and said, "I like her," and walked back to the grill like the conversation had reached its natural and complete conclusion. It had not. But it was a start. The backyard of the Collins family home was, in Selene's professional opinion as a galaxy-crossing scholar of Earth culture, extremely representative of everything she loved about this planet. There was a grill. There were lawn chairs in colors that did not match each other on purpose. There was a dog, an enormous golden retriever named Biscuit, who took one look at Selene's tail, lost his entire mind with joy, and refused to leave her side for the rest of the afternoon. "He thinks you're one of his own," Diane said, watching Biscuit lay his enormous head in Selene's lap. "I am deeply honored," Selene said, scratching behind Biscuit's ears with the practiced precision of someone who understood exactly how ears wanted to be scratched. "He has excellent taste." Marcus, 3 burgers into the afternoon, leaned over to Ryan and said, in a stage whisper that traveled approximately the entire backyard, "Bro. Your girlfriend is being more well-adjusted at a family barbecue than you were the first time you came to one of these." "I was 12, Marcus." "You hid in the garage." "There was a wasp." "There was no wasp, Ryan, you made that up because you didn't want to talk to my cousin Brenda." The afternoon rolled on in exactly the way good afternoons do, slowly, warmly, full of small moments nobody would remember individually but that would add up, eventually, into something that felt like family. Selene answered approximately 400 questions about Vargen Prime with the patience of a woman who had genuinely been waiting her whole life to be asked. Diane cried 2 more times, once about the moons and once, inexplicably, about a story involving Selene's grandmother's star charts. Robert grilled with the focused intensity of a man defending his title. And Biscuit did not leave Selene's side once. It was, against every single one of Ryan's anxious predictions, going perfectly. Which is exactly when things got interesting. Because right as Diane was bringing out dessert, a pie that smelled, to Selene's wolf-enhanced senses, like literal heaven, Selene's nose twitched. Once. Twice. Her ears flattened. "Selene?" Ryan asked, noticing the shift immediately. "I am fine," Selene said, in the exact tone of voice that means someone is not fine. Her eyes were starting to water. Her nose was starting to run. And the longer she sat in that backyard, surrounded by Diane's beautiful, lovingly tended flower beds in full summer bloom, the worse it got. "Oh no," Ryan said, the realization dawning across his face like a slow sunrise of horror. "Oh no, Selene, is it?" "I am fine," Selene said, and then sneezed so violently she startled Biscuit into barking, knocked over a lawn chair with her tail, and sent a paper plate flying directly into Marcus's lap. The entire backyard went silent. Then Marcus, paper plate in his lap, looked up and said, "Okay, I have so many questions about wolf sneezes specifically." What followed can only be described, in the official Collins family record, as the Great Allergy Incident. Selene Rook, conqueror of hyperspace travel, graduate-level scholar of Earth culture, fluent speaker of 3 languages and counting, was, it turned out, catastrophically allergic to Earth pollen in a way that no amount of Vargen biology had prepared her for. Her sneezes were not human-sized. They were Vargen-sized. Which is to say, enormous, frequent, and accompanied by a tail that whipped around with such alarming force that Diane had to relocate the entire dessert table twice. "I am so sorry about your pie," Selene said between sneezes, eyes streaming, ears completely flattened in what could only be described as wolf girl misery. "Honey, the pie is fine, the pie can be replaced, are you okay?" "I am simply betrayed by this planet's flora." Ryan, meanwhile, was sprinting back from the car with an allergy pill he'd grabbed from the glove compartment, because apparently this was a thing that happened on Earth and humans had, in fact, solved it decades ago with science. "Here," he said, pressing it into her hand, kneeling in front of her chair, completely unbothered by the chaos around them. "Take this. It'll help." Selene looked at the small pill. Looked at Ryan. Sneezed directly into his shoulder. "Sorry," she said. "Worth it," Ryan said, and meant it. What nobody in that backyard knew, what wouldn't come out until much, much later, at a moment far more significant than a Saturday barbecue, was that Diane Collins had been standing by the kitchen window the entire time, watching her son kneel in the grass in front of an allergic, sneezing alien girl, gently pressing a pill into her hand like it was the most important thing he'd ever done. And Diane Collins, who had cried twice already that afternoon, quietly turned to her husband and said one sentence that would set an entire chain of events into motion. "Robert," she said, "I think we need to talk to him about Grandma's ring." Robert Collins, spatula in hand, turned to look at his wife. "Already?" he said. "They've been together, what, 2 months?" "Robert. I'll get the ring out of the safe." 2 weeks after the Great Allergy Incident, once Selene had fully recovered, the flower beds had been forgiven, and Biscuit had been promoted to Selene's official Earth best friend, Ryan Collins began acting strange. Not bad strange. Suspicious strange. The kind of strange where a person keeps disappearing for errands that take suspiciously long, comes home with no actual groceries, and flinches slightly whenever his phone buzzes. Selene, who had spent her entire adolescence honing investigative skills via approximately 900 internet conspiracy videos, noticed immediately. "You are hiding something," she announced one evening, tail swishing with the confidence of a detective closing in on her suspect. "I'm not hiding anything," Ryan said, in the exact tone of someone hiding something. "Your ears do a thing. Humans think wolves are the only ones with tells, but you have one too. Right here." She tapped just below his ear. "You go very still right before you lie." "That's, okay, that's deeply unfair, you can't just earn my tells. I have been studying you for months, Ryan Collins. I know all your tells." Ryan, to his credit, held the line for an impressive 11 days. Which, for a man dating a literal wolf with literal wolf instincts, was nothing short of heroic. What Selene didn't know, what she absolutely could not have guessed, despite her impressive detective skills, was that her sneakers were the problem. Her beloved black and pink sneakers. The ones she'd worn across 4 galaxies. The ones that had survived hyperspace turbulence, starport security scanners, and one very unfortunate incident involving a Murnaki stepping on her foot during finals week. They were, after 8 months of constant wear, completely falling apart. Ryan had noticed weeks ago, the sole separating slightly at the toe, the laces fraying, one of the small pink accent stripes peeling at the edge. He hadn't said anything, because Selene loved those shoes with an intensity that bordered on the spiritual, and he wasn't about to be the man who suggested she retire her most prized possession. So instead, he'd done something else entirely. What Ryan Collins had actually been doing, on every single one of those mysterious errands, was something that would have made every YouTube video Selene had ever studied combined look like amateur hour. He had gone to 4 different shoe stores. He had called a specialty custom sneaker artist 3 states away. He had sent that artist 17 photographs of Selene's original sneakers from every conceivable angle, including, and this required considerable stealth, a photo of the inside sole to get the sizing exactly right. He had described, in painstaking detail, the precise shade of pink, the exact placement of the black panels, the very specific way the laces crossed because Selene had a particular method she insisted was correct and would not explain further. And on the 11th day, the package arrived. Ryan signed for it on the porch, glanced over his shoulder to make sure Selene was still occupied watching her recorded shows inside, and carried the box to his car like it contained the nuclear launch codes. He did not open it. He couldn't. Not yet. Because the timing, had to be exactly right. 3 nights later, Ryan asked Selene if she wanted to go for a walk. This was not, on its surface, an unusual request. They walked most evenings, through the small park near their apartment, past the dog park where Biscuit's golden retriever cousins gathered, along the river path where the city lights reflected off the water in a way Selene still hadn't gotten tired of looking at. But tonight, Ryan had a small bag slung over his shoulder. And tonight, he was wearing the specific expression of a man executing a plan months in the making. "You're doing the still thing again," Selene said, watching him carefully as Hay walked below the ear. "I'm not doing anything." "You are absolutely doing something." "Selene." "Ryan." He laughed, that same chaotic, stomach-deep laugh from the very first day they'd met, and reached for her hand. "Just trust me," he said. For like 10 more minutes. They walked along the river path until they reached a small wooden bench overlooking the water, the same bench, in fact, where they'd had their first real conversation about Vargen Prime star charts back when they'd first moved in, the one Selene had quietly decided was her favorite spot on the entire planet, though she'd never told him that. He had told no one that he'd noticed her favorite spot anyway. "Sit," he said. She sat. He knelt down, and for one wild half-second, Selene's wolf-enhanced heart rate spiked so fast she nearly fell off the bench, because kneeling was a very specific human gesture she'd researched extensively and. He pulled a shoebox out of the bag. Not a ring box. A shoebox. Selene stared at the shoebox. "Okay," she said, ears tilting in a mixture of relief and confusion. "I admit, my mind went somewhere very different just now." "I noticed," Ryan said, grinning. "Open it." She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, sat a brand new pair of sneakers, black and pink, the exact same design she'd worn since before she'd ever set foot on Earth, except new. Pristine. The sole solid, the laces crisp, the pink panels vivid and unfaded, every detail matched with an obsessive precision that could only have come from someone who had genuinely studied her old pair down to the stitching. Selene went completely silent. "I noticed yours were falling apart," Ryan said, voice softer now. "I know how much they mean to you. I didn't want to just buy you random sneakers, that felt wrong, so I found someone who could make these exactly the same. Down to the lacing pattern, even though I genuinely do not understand why you cross them that specific way." "It is the correct way," Selene said, voice thick. I know it's the correct way. I made sure he did it the correct way." She looked up at him, eyes bright, ears completely forward. "You did all of this," she said slowly, "because my shoes were falling apart?" "I did all of this," Ryan said, "because those shoes walked across 4 galaxies to find me. I figured the least I could do was make sure they could keep walking." Selene Rook, who had survived hyperspace, academic rigor, an allergy apocalypse, and a backyard full of Collins family chaos without shedding a single tear, sat on that riverside bench and cried. Not sad crying. The other kind. The kind that happens when someone has loved you so specifically, so carefully, that they noticed the exact thing that mattered most to you and decided, quietly, without being asked, to take care of it. She threw her arms around him so fast she nearly knocked the shoebox into the Ver. "Careful. Careful, the shoes." "I don't care about the shoes." "You absolutely care about the shoes, you have cried about these shoes before." "That is different, Ryan." What Selene didn't know, because Ryan Collins, despite his many qualities, had never been described by anyone as subtle, except apparently when it counted most, was that the shoebox had not been the whole plan. It had been the warm-up. Because tucked into the toe of the right sneaker, wrapped in a small piece of tissue paper so it wouldn't rattle and give itself away, was something else entirely. Selene, still wiping her eyes, still half laughing at her own tears, reached into the box to lift the new sneakers out for a proper look, and felt something solid inside the toe. "Ryan," she said slowly, "there is something in my shoe." "Yeah," Ryan said. His voice had changed. Gone quiet. Steady in a way that made every hair on Selene's tail stand up at once. "There is." She pulled the tissue paper free. And inside it, small and gleaming under the riverside streetlights, sat a ring. Selene Rook, scholar of Earth, hacker of internets, wearer of sneakers, keeper of Gerald's secrets, sat completely frozen on that riverside bench with a ring in her hand and her entire universe narrowing down to one single point. Ryan was still kneeling. Of course he was still kneeling. He'd been kneeling the whole time, and she'd been too busy crying about shoes to notice that the man she loved had positioned himself exactly the way every single YouTube video about human marriage proposals had described. "I had this whole speech," he said, and his voice was shaking now, just slightly, just enough that Selene's heart cracked open even further. "I practiced it. Marcus helped me write it, which in hindsight was a mistake because half of it was unusable. But I'm looking at you right now and I don't remember a single word of it, so I'm just going to say the true thing instead." He took a breath. "You crossed 4 galaxies to find a world you'd never seen, because you believed it was worth finding. And somehow, completely by accident, I ended up being part of what you found. I don't know how I got that lucky. I think about it every single day. And I would like, if you'll let me, to spend the rest of my life making sure I deserve it." Selene Rook, who had once told a troll doll her deepest secret out of fear that no one else could ever understand her love for an entire alien species, looked at the human kneeling in front of her holding her hand and her new sneakers and the truth of everything she'd ever wanted, and said the only word that mattered. "Yes." News, as it turns out, travels at roughly the speed of light when Marcus Webb is involved. By the time Ryan and Selene walked back into their apartment, Selene still wearing one new sneaker and holding the other, because apparently you cannot simply wait to wear engagement sneakers, that is not how engage 'em. And sneakers work. Ryan's phone had 31 notifications. Marcus had, somehow, already known. Marcus had, somehow, already told Diane. Diane had, somehow, already called Robert, who was, at that exact moment, standing in his garage pulling out decorations from a box labeled wedding stuff, just in case, that he had apparently purchased the day after the barbecue. "Robert," Diane said over speakerphone, her voice already wet with tears, "did you just say you've had wedding decorations sitting in the garage for 2 weeks?" "I had a feeling, Diane." "You had a feeling?" The boy knelt in the grass for an allergy pill. "I'm not an idiot." Selene, sitting on the kitchen counter with her new sneaker held against her chest like a trophy, looked at Ryan over the sound of his entire family losing their minds through a phone speaker, and said the only appropriate response available to her. "Your family is unwell. I love them so much." "Yeah," Ryan said, grinning so wide it hurt. "Welcome to the family, officially." There was, however, one small complication that nobody had considered in all the chaos and celebration. Selene Rook was not, technically, a legal resident of Earth. She existed on a student exchange visa under the GWASC Supplementary Partner Program, a visa that covered exactly one thing: academic study. It said absolutely nothing about marriage, weddings, or extended residency for the purpose of building a life with a human she intended to spend forever with. This realization hit Ryan at exactly 11:47 p.m., 3 hours after the proposal, while Selene slept peacefully beside him with one new sneaker still somehow tucked under her pillow like a small black and pink security blanket. Ryan sat up in bed. "Oh no," he whispered to the ceiling. "What is it?" Selene mumbled, half asleep, one ear twitching. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." "Ryan. It's fine. You're doing the still thing under your ear right now and your eyes are open in the dark like a Victorian ghost. What is wrong?" What followed was, by any measure, the single most anticlimactic obstacle in the history of intergalactic romance: paperwork. Selene Rook had survived hyperspace travel, academic rigor at the most prestigious institution in the known universe, an allergy apocalypse, and a marriage proposal delivered via shoebox. She was, by this point, functionally unstoppable. She was not, it turned out, prepared for immigration forms. "This form," she said, staring at a sheet of paper with the focused fury of someone declaring war, "is asking me to prove my species' point of origin using documentation that does not exist on this planet. Okay, let's call the Guask liaison office. They'll have a template for this. It is asking me to list my country of citizenship, Ryan. I do not have a country. I have a planet. I'll write Vargen Prime and we'll figure it out from there. It will not fit in the box, Ryan, box is very small. What saved them, and this is a detail that would later become a beloved piece of Colin's family lore, told and retold at every holiday gathering for years to come, was Professor Orville. Yes. That Professor Orville. The boulder-shaped Mernaki academic who had given Ryan and Selene the only known standing ovation in Guask history. It turned out Professor Orville, in addition to being an academic legend, also sat on the Galactic Union's Interspecies Relations Committee, a fact he had never once mentioned, because, in his own words when Ryan finally reached him, it did not seem relevant until it became relevant. Within 72 hours, Selene had a properly issued Galactic Union Resident Partnership document, recognized under an Earth treaty Ryan didn't fully understand but was deeply, permanently grateful for. Ryan said, staring at the approved documents in disbelief, had this power the whole time? He is a very efficient man, Selene said. I told you he liked us. With the paperwork sorted, the family thoroughly informed, and Marcus already, against everyone's wishes, drafting a best man speech he refused to let anyone preview, there was only one obstacle left standing between Ryan and Selene and the wedding day. And it arrived in the form of a simple question from Diane Collins, asked over Sunday dinner 3 weeks before the big day, fork paused halfway to her mouth. Selene, honey, does your family back home know? Are they coming? The table went quiet. Selene's ears dropped, just slightly. They know, she said carefully. Whether they will come is a more complicated question. Because Selene's family, proud, traditional Vargen who had never quite understood her obsession with Earth, who had called her fascination a useless skill, who had nearly knocked over a dinner table when she requested a human roommate, had not yet said a single word about the wedding. Not congratulations. Not questions. Not anything. Just silence, stretching all the way from Vargen Prime to Earth. 2 weeks before the wedding, a package arrived at the apartment, small, plain, wrapped in materials Ryan didn't recognize, postmarked from a transit station that didn't exist on any Earth map. Selene knew immediately what it was. She sat on the floor of their living room, Gerald propped on the couch beside her like a witness to history, and opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, written in flowing Vargen script, the same elegant handwriting Selene had used for years to leave Ryan's secret notes he couldn't read. And beneath the letter, wrapped carefully in soft cloth, sat a second leather collar. Older. Worn smooth with decades of wear. Selene's hands began to shake the moment she recognized it. That's, Ryan started. My grandmother's, Selene said, voice barely above a whisper. The letter, which Selene read aloud slowly, translating as she went, was from her mother. It said that the family had spent weeks arguing, about Earth, about humans, about traditions and distance and fear of a daughter who had chosen a life 4 galaxies away from everything they knew. It said that her father had nearly missed the transit booking out of stubbornness, and that her mother had booked it herself, in secret, the moment Selene's letter about the engagement arrived. It said that her grandmother, who had passed before Selene ever left for the GUASC, had once said something about Selene that the family had never fully understood until now. That girl is going to bring something back to this family that we don't yet have a word for. Let her go and see what she finds. And it said, in the final line, in handwriting that grew visibly less steady toward the bottom of the page. We will be there. All of us. We are bringing the stars with us, the way you always wanted. Selene cried for exactly 4 minutes, Ryan counted, because apparently that was a thing he did now, quietly tracking the small data points of the woman he loved, and then abruptly sat up straight, eyes wide with sudden alarm. Wait, she said. All of them. All of them are coming. Yeah? Ryan. My uncle is coming. Okay. My uncle does not understand personal space and he will absolutely try to discuss mating rituals with your father within the first 5 minutes. This is a known pattern of behavior. Ryan stared at her. I'm sorry, did you say mating rituals? With my dad? We need to prepare your parents, Ryan, this is not a drill. What followed was, by every conceivable metric, the single most chaotic week in Colin's family history. Robert Collins spent 4 days building a temporary pavilion structure in the backyard specifically engineered, per Selene's careful instructions, to accommodate Vargen tail clearance and a species that preferred standing room over chairs. Diane Collins learned, via 3 separate increasingly panicked phone calls with Selene, exactly which foods were Vargen delicacies, which Earth foods were considered deeply offensive by Vargen standards, and, most importantly, that under no circumstances should anyone make direct, prolonged eye contact with Selene's uncle, as this was apparently a challenge gesture in Vargen culture and would result in what Selene only described as an incident. Marcus, despite explicit instructions not to, Googled Vargen Prime customs at 2 in the morning and showed up the next day having memorized 17 completely incorrect facts, all of which he confidently shared with Selene's bewildered father within the first hour of his arrival. And yet, against every single odd, through every single moment of chaos, when Selene's family stepped off the transit shuttle and onto Earth's soil for the first time, and Diane Collins walked directly up to Selene's mother and wrapped her in a hug exactly as enthusiastic as the one she'd given Selene months earlier, something clicked into place that no amount of preparation could have manufactured. 2 families. 2 galaxies. 1 backyard. And, against all odds, 1 enormous golden retriever named Biscuit, who took one look at the entire Vargen delegation and lost his mind with the purest joy of his entire canine life. The night before the wedding, Selene sat on the same riverside bench where Ryan had proposed, her new sneakers, no longer quite so new, already beautifully scuffed from months of real life, resting beside her. Gerald perched on her lap for what she'd quietly decided would be his final official duty as her confidant. "This is the last time," she told him softly, "that I'll need to tell you anything in secret. Tomorrow, I won't have anything left to hide. I get to just say it all, out loud, to everyone." Gerald's googly eyes stared forward, same as always. "Thank you," Selene whispered, "for keeping every single secret since I was 5 years old. For knowing about the YouTube videos. For knowing about him before I told anyone. For coming all this way with me." She set him gently on the bench beside her and looked up at the sky, Earth's sky, the one she dreamed about since she was a pup, and somewhere far beyond it, a sky with 2 moons that her whole family had crossed the universe to leave behind, just for her. Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "You're not supposed to see me the night before," Ryan said, sitting down beside her anyway. "I looked it up. It's a whole tradition." "I don't believe in that tradition," Selene said. "I believe in this bench." The wedding took place in the Collins family backyard, beneath a pavilion built specifically to accommodate one very excited Vargen wedding party, decorated with flowers carefully selected by Diane to avoid triggering a repeat of the Great Allergy incident, on a day so clear that both Earth's single moon and, for one brief, magical, scientifically improbable moment that Selene's family insisted was a sign, a faint daytime glimmer that looked remarkably like a second moon, hung in the sky. Together. Marcus, despite every warning, delivered a best man speech that somehow included the phrase, intergalactic furry discourse, and still, against all odds, made everyone cry. Robert Collins walked Selene's father through the grilling process with the seriousness of a man passing down sacred knowledge. Diane Collins cried 4 separate times before the ceremony even started, a new family record. And Selene's uncle did, in fact, attempt to discuss mating rituals with Robert during the reception, but Robert, fully briefed and gloriously prepared, simply handed him a beer and said, "Let's talk about grilling instead," and somehow, against every odd in the universe, that worked perfectly. When Selene walked down the makeshift aisle in a dress her mother had helped design, one that left room for her tail to move freely, because some traditions deserved to evolve, wearing her original, battle-worn black and pink sneakers underneath, because some things you simply do not retire on the most important day of your life. She looked at Ryan Collins standing at the end of that aisle in his slightly too tight rented suit, tattooed arm visible at the sleeve, eyes already wet, and felt the entire weight of every galaxy she'd ever crossed settle into something that finally, completely, made sense. They exchanged vows that mixed English and Vargen, written together over weeks, full of inside jokes that made Marcus loudly demand an explanation and made Diane sob into a tissue Robert had thoughtfully prepositioned in his jacket pocket. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Biscuit the golden retriever let out one single, enormous, perfectly timed bark from the back row, which everyone agreed was either an objection or an enthusiastic endorsement, and which Selene chose, forever after, to interpret as the latter. They were pronounced husband and wife beneath a sky with 1 visible moon and the ghost of a second, surrounded by 2 families from 2 galaxies who, against every reasonable expectation, had somehow become one. That night, after the dancing ended and the lights dimmed and Marcus had finally, mercifully. Stop trying to start a conga line. Selene and Ryan sat together on the same riverside bench, now officially husband and wife. Her new sneakers, the wedding pair, still impossibly pink and black, propped up on the railing beside her old, beloved, battle-scarred pair. 2 pairs, Ryan said, looking at them both. 1 for everywhere you've been. 1 for everywhere we're going. Selene leaned her head against his shoulder, tail curled contentedly around them both, and looked up at the stars, at the galaxy that held a planet with violet skies and twin moons and a family who had crossed an unimaginable distance just to watch her say I do. Gerald, she said softly, to the small troll doll now sitting in the place of honor on the bench beside them, pink hair slightly faded after a journey across the cosmos and a wedding day full of tears. I told you this would be the greatest story of all time. And somewhere, on a little wooden bench beside a river, on a planet that had once been nothing but pixels on a screen to a 5-year-old girl with wolf ears and a borrowed dream, the greatest love story the galaxy had ever seen had finally, completely, become real. This has been HI Beyond the Stars. If this story made you believe in love that crosses galaxies, leave a comment below. And tell us, what should Selene and Ryan's next chapter look like? Subscribe for more stories from galaxies you've never visited, but feelings you already know.